These men, the nation's Project Mercury astronauts, are here after a long and perhaps unprecedented series of evaluations which told our medical consultants and scientists of their superb adaptability to their coming flight. Which of these men will be first to orbit the Earth, I cannot tell you.
They all want to know, though, who is going to be the first among them. They did experience rigorous testings. In retrospect, we can say that they are the corps of astronauts who have been tested in more ways than any other group. Just these twists and turns, these very violent tests that the astronauts had to endure. So, the individual that is selected to represent the United States as the first human into space, if you've been able to read the tiny writing here in the notebook, it is Alan Shepard. We'll give you time, a few slides in here, to jot down the name and the date of this. But let's familiarize yourself with Alan Shepard.
Alan Shepard was probably Class 1 astronaut.
He was bright.
Family was important to him.
He was really a wonderful human being. He was a proud man, sometimes arrogant, but test pilots are always that way. You want them to be that way.
It's a first step we had to make, and he did it well.
When you talk about the right stuff, he was the epitome of the right stuff.
The Right Stuff references in the video clip have to do with Tom Wolfe's book called The Right Stuff that was then later turned into a film. In the book, he described how these 7 astronauts were made up of the right stuff to represent the United States as first space explorers. The movie is rated PG if you're to look it up, but you have to recognize that the PG rating is before the MPAA switched to a new rating system that included PG-13. So this PG really would translate into a R rating today. So I'm not recommending book movie to you at all. I'm just letting you know where this Right Stuff reference comes from, because it's a very common expression in the world of space exploration. It appears in Space Chimps. It needs a chimp with the right stuff. At the beginning of the animated film, the chimps do the right stuff walk, and at the end, the right stuff walk. This right stuff walk comes from the Right Stuff movie, where it was one of the first feature films to include motion in slow motion for dramatic effect. Larry, you forgot something. The right stuff. At the wonderful Space Academy that I got to attend, the graduation ceremony, they had each group of teams come and get their Space Academy wings to put on their flight suits. And then near the end of the ceremony, they announced that there was, from the graduating class, a participant who was going to earn the Right Stuff Award. And the Right Stuff Award is, well, basically the person who knows the most stuff about NASA, I guess. And yes, I was the winner of the Space Camp Right Stuff Award. There I am with my camp counselors. Sounds like I went to rehab, but Space Academy was where I was at. And the great prize was that I then was granted the opportunity to provide a student with a free pass to attend Space Camp next summer. And that was a tough decision, to try and pick a student and not have others upset. So I picked a student who was an avid space enthusiast since they were a little kid. And we sent Mr. Price, Alex Price, over here on the left. He went to Space Camp. And this is compare and contrast the adults enjoying the world of Space Academy and some of the folks here less than enthusiastic wearing their flight suit, apparently. One of the goals that you accomplish on the first day with your team is you come up with a patch that's going to represent you for the week at Space Camp. We were assigned the team name Integrity. We decided to represent this as a keyhole shape for our patch, as we were thinking about being the key to opening the door for future students This right here is a shout out to the Boeing company, as it's their logo, as Boeing was the one who paid our scholarships for us to attend Space Academy. So when Alex returns home from space camp, I ask his mom if they had their campers make patches. And she said, oh yeah, they did patches. I said, can you send me a picture of what Alex's patch looked like? So she sent me the patch picture, and let's just take a look. They got an actual patch. They got an actual sewn patch. All of their names. There's Mr. Price right there. They got an actual sewn patch. We did get a nice color copy of our design. They got a patch, a sewn patch. A few years later, I did see this pattern on a NASA document, and the key to discovery. This document predates our patch. It's a common theme. So Alex did many of the things that I had done at space camp. This little ride shoots you up and then you plummet straight down for a few seconds and experience weightlessness. We got to run simulations where we were the flight controllers for the mission. And again, the adults, we love wearing the flight suits. The teens, not so much. One of the highlights of my Space Academy adventure was I got to be the mission commander. Now, the mission commander is actually the person who lands the shuttle. So this is my pilot, Charlie. I know you would think the pilot is responsible for takeoff and landing of the space shuttle orbiter, but the pilot is responsible for takeoff, and the mission commander on the left is responsible for the mission and landing. So here's Charlie and I in our simulation. Alex got on a different simulation. His simulation was the International Space Station, where he was a mission specialist there, and they were running scientific experiments, and the simulation was that they became ill, and the medicine provided to make them feel better was Skittles. Alex and his colleagues ate so many Skittles that here they are on the floor overdosing from their sick pills. Well, what was supposed to provide relief for their sickness. This is Alex just kind of rubbing it in that not only did all the things I did, but he got to do a little bit more. He actually got to do the underwater aviation challenge. I didn't get to do it, even though it was planned to do it, but some feedback on the summer before from teachers was, we don't like putting our swimsuits on in front of other teachers and being embarrassed. So for that reason, that was cut from my Space Academy adventure. And then to make the situation even worse, as if I wasn't upset enough by the patch picture that Alex's mom sent me, she then decided to send me a half-naked picture of her offspring. This is the mom to blame, Miss Lori Price. This is Team Von Braun's graduation photo here. Alex is right there. And his Advanced Space Academy wings. So the teen space camp is also called Space Academy. And here's my photo. Look at us. We are digging our flight suits. That is one big old smile. I think maybe you might be able to see my back molars there potentially. And my graduation certificate from Space Camp, Space Academy. And I'm looking forward to Advanced Space Academy, as you well know. And not too long ago, a Riverhawk attended Space Camp one summer. And of course, I was all interested in the patch that they had received. And we'll take a look at that patch here. The team name is a reference to a Greek god in mythology. And this is our great Riverhawk right there on the patch. And here is Wyatt in his Space Camp gear. And he participated in ground control as well as the in-space simulations. One of the great things I like about the patches, for Alex, you'll see the solar rocket boosters pointing to him, and for Wyatt, you'll see the nose of the orbiter is pointing for him as well. That's an awesome tradition, I think, that we can say is established now. Going back to the astronaut here that certainly has the right stuff of Alan Shepard. We've got a few other clips to play for you about his first voyage.
Shepard was a standout from the very beginning for me. He was a very bright guy, probably the brightest of the bunch.
Glenn, of course, I had known before. Shira, I had known before because of our Navy connections. So I knew there was a lot of talent there, and I knew that it was going to be a tough fight to win the prize.
All 7 astronauts were in one room. Bob Gilruth came in and said, okay, Al Shepard, you have the first one, Gus Grissom, you have the second, John Glenn, you are the backup for both. And Dr. Gilruth walked out of the room and said, good luck. And so Daddy's in the room by himself with all 7 original, well, including himself, 6 set of eyes looking at him. And he thought of how elated he was.
But yet almost immediately afterwards feeling sorry for my buddies, because there they were. I mean, they were trying just as hard as I was.
We all shook each other's hand. We all shook Al's hands.
Pretty soon I was the only guy left in the room.
We jokingly later on confided in each other that the choice of Al Shepard was just plain dumb, because it should have been me, everybody said. The competition ended once that decision was made, and everybody wanted to make every flight an absolute success.
He was obviously ready to fly, and we were ready to help him. And it was a hell of a day.
Now, Alan Shepard's family didn't know that he was the first astronaut selected to fly in the Mercury program until the day of the flight. And pretty much it was because NASA didn't want the family blabbing that he was to be the first. So imagine the surprise that morning when the media amassed on the lawns of the Shepard home. The next image I want to share with you from the Life magazine series is one where the photographer who was assigned to the Mercury 7 through the public relations of NASA, after a press conference at the Mercury 7, he asked Shepard to make a face showing how he would feel or respond if he found out he was the first one to be able to fly a Mercury mission. And quite atypical for Shepard, he actually turned to the camera and made a funny face, and this, I say out of character, as he was very professional in his job duties. He had, of course, his military stance about him. So here's a fun picture of Shepard amongst the Mercury 7. And another clip about the ambassador to space for the U.S.
There was a classic picture of him when he reached the launch pad. He was accompanied by Dr. Bill Douglas, who was the astronaut's physician, and there was Al in a silver spacesuit with the air conditioner in his hand.
I remember saying to myself, well, I'm not going to see this Redstone again. And pilots love to go out and kick the tires. And it was sort of like reaching out and kicking the tires on the Redstone. Because I stopped and looked at it, looked back and up at this beautiful rocket, and thought, well, okay, Buster, let's go and get the job done.
What a sight, and what a thrill. That was probably one of the most exciting moments of my lifetime, if not the most exciting.
Just want to emphasize the gentleman that was speaking at the end of the clip is Christopher Kraft, for whom the Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas is named for. So here's the great moment of Alan Shepard coming out of the facilities to embark on his mission. And as he recited how, in the tradition of test pilots, you kick the tires, here he is looking up at his rocket and recognizing this is probably the last time that he will certainly see his great Redstone rocket. The silver spacesuit referenced in the clip there, the suits were not different at all really from the pressure suits that test pilots wore, but they definitely wanted to look and stand out as an astronaut, as a spacesuit, and so they were colored silver. This is one of the silver suits of the Mercury 7 on display in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in D.C.
Almost every flight has delays. You expect them.
There was a time during the countdown when there was a problem with the inverter in the Redstone.
And then the weather came.
Turns out Al Shepard had been in that spacecraft for more than 4 hours.
Waited and waited.
Well, if that's the case, then I would like to get out and relieve myself.
That was funny. You want to get out and urinate.
Van Braun says the astronaut will stay in the nose cone.
You just go ahead and do it.
And of course, with a cotton undergarment and with 100% oxygen flowing through that spacecraft, I was totally dry by the time we launched.
This takes us to our Alpha Mix appendix, the only one that I haven't filled in for you because it's kind of a fan favorite among students. Here is the MAG. This is something that was developed once they realized that maybe our astronauts will sit on the pad a little longer than intended, for safety purposes, of course, to run through checks, double checks, and triple checks. So we have the introduction of the MAG, and the MAG is the maximum absorbency garment. It's your astronaut diaper. But astronauts very much would not approve of calling it that. It's the MAG, the maximum absorbency garment. The Alpha Mix appendix here, the very last one, is WCS, which is your waste collection system. We'll just give you a heads up now that your end of final celebration of knowledge is associated with the age-old question of how do astronauts go to the bathroom in space. So crew systems, definitely something we will explore and have fun with at the end of the marking period. So let's record in your notes this historic moment for NASA. We have ourselves Shepard. You always just need the surnames, last names. You want to jot he's the first U.S. American in space, and that occurred 5th of May, 1961, not too long after Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. You don't need to make a note of it in your notes or notebook, but very much shorter flight than Yuri Gagarin's well over an hour and a half. This is a 15-minute and 28-second flight, and still to this day is the shortest space flight in history. It really was a response to the Soviet Union. We can do what you did as well. And in fact, some people say that this should be considered the first space flight because Shepard at many points in the flight was in control of his capsule, where people argue that Gagarin was not in control of his capsule. He didn't pilot it. The mission control for the Soviet space program did. There were times, just like there were times with the Shepard mission where the astronaut cosmonaut were guiding and manually maneuvering their spacecraft. Alan Shepard started the tradition that the rest of the Mercury crew followed, is they were given the opportunity to name their capsule, and Shepard opted to include the 7 as a way to honor the fellow 6 astronauts that trained with him and their camaraderie as a team. Just as the Soviet program is steeped with traditions that follow some of the things that Gagarin did on his first space flight, many of the things that Shepard did on his space flight is a tradition for all astronauts that have come since. This is John Glenn. He was the backup to the prime crew of Alan Shepard. And the tradition started here with NASA is the launch breakfast. Not launch your breakfast, but your breakfast on the morning of launch. It consists of steak, eggs, toast, and orange juice. And this is the traditional launch day breakfast for astronauts. Here Shepard is being wished well, I'm sure, by a fellow Mercury 7 astronaut here and here. Not sure what the ground crew person is thinking here. I'm sure it's just one of those moments where you're transitioning in facial expressions and the camera snaps. I do want to point out the pad leader here, the gentleman who will always be seen with a bow tie. This is Gunther Wendt, and just because I so often don't do proper justice to the German engineer names. For example, I am constantly not meaning to mispronounce Werner von Braun. See, I always say von Braun, I mean von Braun. So I wanted to make sure you were aware I was saying Gunther Wendt correctly, and we had Air Redman pronounce it for you.
Gunther Wendt.
Awesome. Gunther Wendt was the pad leader for NASA for several decades. Here's Shepard in the capsule awaiting liftoff. When reporters asked astronaut Alan Shepard what he thought about as he sat atop the Redstone rocket waiting for liftoff, he replied, "The fact that every part of this ship was built by the lowest bidder." Always comforting thoughts as you're sitting atop a controlled bomb. I once heard a shuttle astronaut share that they had thought similarly as they were waiting launch, and they had done some calculations that if 99 and 99/100% of everything worked for launch, that left room for 6,000 parts to fail, to go wrong. So even if everything worked at nearly 100%, if you're off by 1/100% perfection, then 6,000 things or parts could go wrong. Definitely not the way you want to be thinking about your mission to space atop your rocket. As you're aware, lots of time had passed, much more time, hours even, than was expected for Shepard to be sitting in his Mercury capsule. And after all the safety, triple, quadruple safety checks, Alan shouted out to the mission control team, "Why don't you just fix your little problem and light this candle?" And of course, this is not saying stop any of the safety protocols, but just saying, let's do this. Let's light this candle and go. And there is the candle lit and away to space.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff. Liftoff at 34 minutes after the hour.
Launch is over. Operation was probably one of the smoothest and one of the quickest we've ever had.
It just hit the water a moment ago. A cheer went up from the ship company watching here from all decks on the aircraft carrier.
It was a perfect day. Perfect day for him, perfect day for us.
These are some of the folks who were fortunate enough to be at Cape Canaveral and watch the liftoff of the Redstone. Very special audience here with the President viewing the launch in the White House, President Kennedy. We'll wrap up here looking at the TPS, the initialism for Thermal Protection System, and that is the heat shield, as you and I would probably call it more often than TPS, but the thermal protection system, the heat shield that allows the capsule to survive being in that fiery ball of reentry. As you saw, the U.S. lands their spacecraft returning from space in the ocean, whereas the Soviets land on land. There is this impact skirt just below the heat shield thermal protection system. It doesn't provide an enormous amount of cushioning, and likewise landing in the ocean isn't too terribly softer than landing on land. It is softer, but it's not a tremendous big difference of smackdown back to planet Earth. Here is the Marine copter capturing the capsule of Freedom 7. And high-definition rendering of this great moment, and you can see Alan Shepard coming up onto the craft there. He wasn't quite there in this photo. Bird's eye view, as we like to say, of Shepard. Getting closer to being safe inside the helicopter. Here he is safely on board the aircraft carrier. And then when he made it safely to, I think it was in the Bahamas, the transport point. And here he is being congratulated by Gus Grissom and Deke Slayton, fellow Mercury astronauts. Able to make a phone call home to his loved ones, let them know that he has returned safely. And she's probably asking, why didn't you tell me you were going to be the first, perhaps? The fellow Mercury 7 doing the old Abel and Baker of checking out their fine write-ups in the newspaper of their fellow astronaut. Later receiving a medal from President Kennedy. Always nice to receive an accommodation from the President. The Freedom 7 capsule itself was for many years on display at the U.S. Naval Academy. It is now, though, displayed as part of the President John Kennedy Library in Boston. In poured the fan mail. I wish I'd have been alive in 1961. I could send some fan mail in and perhaps received an Alan Shepard autograph. I don't think he responded to all the email with an autograph, but that would be a great autograph to have in a collection. In 1998, Shepard passed. The 50th anniversary of his first flight into space for the U.S. was commemorated on Astronaut Day, and there was a presentation where Shepard's family spoke. Also, Scott Carpenter, one of the Mercury 7, was there for the unveiling of 2 postage stamps, commemorative stamps, one in honor of Shepard as a member of the Mercury project, and then also a stamp to recognize the Messenger mission, which is the Messenger craft here. That was the first spacecraft to orbit Mercury. You might think this is an image of the moon, but it's actually the planet Mercury, which you can see why often has the nickname of the moon's twin. And a little perspective for you is this is a view of the Earth and our moon right there, as viewed from if you were at Mercury in our solar system, a mere 61 million miles away.